What started as something small and ended with you knowing way too much. I asked my aunt why she stopped coming to family dinners. She laughed first, then told me something that made me look at my parents completely different. I haven't unlearned it since. I was 26 at the time. I'd just moved back to my hometown after nearly a decade of pretending it didn't exist. The plan was simple: stay a few months, save some money, and maybe help out my mom while my dad recovered from back surgery. That's how she sold it to me anyway. What it turned into, I still don't have the right words for. It was late October, one of those Sundays where the wind makes everything feel smaller. My Aunt Diane was in her kitchen baking like she always did. Cinnamon buns, apple pie, whatever felt like comfort. I hadn't seen her in years, not really. She'd vanished from holidays sometime around when I left for college. No goodbye, no drama, at least not openly, just silence. It never seemed odd back then because, in our family, silence was the drama. We weaponized it, avoided questions until they aged into secrets. I didn't know any different, so when I asked, "Why'd you stop coming to family dinners?" I expected a joke or a shrug, something like your dad's stories got too boring or your mom overcooks everything. Instead, she wiped her hands on a towel, leaned back against the counter, and smiled in that tight, tired way people do when they've held something in too long. "No one ever told you," she said. "Told me what?" She didn't answer right away, just stared at me for a long beat, then reached under the counter and pulled out a worn folder. Not dramatic. No lock, no hidden compartment. Just paper, ordinary paper. She slid it across the table, tapped once on the cover and said, "Start there." The first page was a letter from 1999. I recognized my mom's handwriting immediately. Her signature curls, the way she looped her Y's like little nooses. The letter was addressed to my aunt, apologizing for what happened and asking for discretion going forward. I flipped the page. Bank statements, withdrawals, legal documents, things I wasn't sure I should be seeing. But the story they told, slowly, one line at a time, changed everything I thought I knew. My parents had taken out a second mortgage on their house in 1998. That part one vaguely remembered. Something about renovations, a new roof. What no one ever said was that the money was used to cover up a lawsuit. A big one. Not against them, though. Against my uncle. Aunt Diane's ex-husband. He'd been accused of something serious. I won't go into the details here, but it involved a minor, someone from our neighborhood, and it wasn't just a rumor. Charges were filed. My father, being the local guy with connections, made some calls, paid off the right people. The charges were dropped, sealed. My aunt never forgave him. She left him 6 months later, but by then the damage was done. The silence wasn't just between her and her husband, it became a wall between her and the whole family. "Your parents protected him," she said. "They chose him over me, over that kid, over the truth." I sat there, the letter trembling in my hands. It felt like the walls of my childhood were paper thin, and someone had just kicked them in. Diane never raised her voice. She didn't need to. The quiet made it worse. I asked her why she never said anything. "Because no one would have believed me," she said, "and because your dad made sure I couldn't." She showed me more, emails, old voicemails, even a photo of the kid involved, now grown. I knew him. We'd gone to school together. He worked at the hardware store where I'd bought duct tape just last week. Everything inside me flipped. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to my parents' house and demand answers. But I didn't. I just sat there. And that night, I went home and didn't sleep. For the first time in years, I looked around at all the stories I'd grown up hearing. How dad was the fixer, how mom always handled things, how family always came first, and wondered what any of it meant now. The next day, I visited my parents like nothing happened. I smiled, made coffee, nodded through my dad's same old back-in-my-day speeches. But every glance, every quiet exchange between them felt loaded now. I started noticing things. Their shared looks when the news was on, the sudden silences when I entered a room. My whole life, I thought I was raised by people who had it all together. Now I realized I was raised by people who got very good at covering up their tracks. Over the next few weeks, I kept digging. Quietly, I didn't confront anyone, not yet. I needed to know more, and the more I learned, the darker it got. They had paid off more than one family. Not just Diane's situation, there were others. People I remembered from childhood. Neighbors who moved away suddenly, a teacher who was fired without explanation, a cousin who'd stopped speaking to us in high school and no one ever said why. My parents were the common thread, always helping, always stepping in. I used to think they were saints. Now I saw they were just really good at keeping things quiet. One night, I went back to Diane's. I asked her if she ever thought about going public. She shook her head. I tried. Back then, no one listened. They shut me down so fast I thought I was losing my mind. "Why are you telling me now?" I asked. She looked at me like I should already know. "Because you asked. There's more, so much more. Things I can't write here because some of the people involved are still around. And some still don't know what their parents did to protect each other. Every time I peel back another layer, I find another crack in the foundation I used to call family. And the worst part, I still haven't told them what I know. I don't know if I ever will. Because once I say it out loud, it's real. And once it's real, nothing will ever be the same again. But I can't stop digging, not anymore. I started keeping a notebook. Not on my phone, too risky. A real one, spiral-bound, the kind high schoolers use for math class. I wrote everything in code at first. Initials, dates, vague references only I could decipher. I wasn't even sure why I was doing it. Maybe part of me wanted to believe it was all in my head, that Diane had exaggerated. But the more I wrote, the more undeniable it became. I had to see it laid out, not just stories whispered across coffee tables, but patterns, timelines, gaps. One night, while going through a box in our attic, the one labeled holiday decorations, I found a VHS tape wedged between two dusty plastic wreaths. No label, just black casing. I almost threw it aside, but curiosity won. I dug out an old VCR from the basement, the same one my parents used to record my elementary school plays, and watched it in the garage, door locked, volume low. It was a birthday party, mine I think, or maybe my cousin's. Kids in the backyard, balloons, cake, everyone smiling, but that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the way my uncle, the one Diane divorced, kept drifting in and out of frame, not doing anything, just hovering, watching, always on the edge, just behind someone else. Then at one point he leaned down and whispered something into my dad's ear. My dad turned to him, nodded once, and smiled. And for a split second my mom glanced at them, not in anger, but with something that looked terrifyingly like approval. I paused the tape, rewound, watched again. Same movements, same looks, that smile. I didn't sleep that night. 2 days later, I brought it to Diane. She didn't want to watch it. But she did, silent the whole way through. When the tape ended, she stood up, walked to the sink, and just stared out the window. I knew it, she whispered. I just didn't want to see it. She told me about a night in 1997, a dinner where everyone pretended everything was fine, even though it wasn't. My uncle had already been accused by then, not formally, but the rumors had started. Diane had begged my dad to cut ties. He told her flat out, if I cut him out, we all go down. She hadn't known what that meant at the time. Now she did. Now I did. There were financial ties, land deals. My dad had co-signed something for my uncle back in '93. A property near the lake. A lodge. I barely remembered it, but I'd been there once as a kid. All wood-paneled walls and that strange mildew smell. Turns out the lodge had been used for more than fishing trips. Diane didn't have proof. Not in a way you could take to court, but she had stories, testimonies, bits and pieces that didn't mean much alone, but together, they painted a picture no one wanted to admit was real. I kept thinking, how did I not see any of this growing up? But then I remembered, every time I'd asked questions as a kid, I'd been met with that's not your business or you don't need to worry about that. And I hadn't, because I trusted them. I stopped trusting them the day I found the second tape. It was in my dad's workshop, inside a locked drawer he'd forgotten to relock. This one was labeled, just a date, June 3rd, 2001. I don't want to describe what was on it, I'll just say this. It wasn't a party, and it wasn't something I should have seen. It changed how I looked at my dad. My whole body shook when I realized my mom had to have known. There's no way she didn't. I didn't confront them. I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I took the tape, made a copy, and put the original back exactly where I found it. Then I bought a fireproof box and stored it at Diane's, along with the notebook and everything else. Because at that point, I knew if I ever did speak up, I needed to have everything in order. That same week, I noticed my dad watching me more closely, asking strange questions. You going through old stuff up there? Or, some things are better left alone. He said it casually, like a joke, but the edge in his voice wasn't something I'd imagined. And then one night, I came home and the attic was clean. Like, emptied, not tidied, not organized. Gone. Boxes, old furniture, decorations, everything I hadn't already pulled, all gone. I asked my mom about it. She said they'd decided to do some downsizing. I didn't believe her. I went back to Diane's that night and told her everything. She didn't act surprised, just poured us both a drink and said, I hope you're ready. I wasn't, not even close, but I knew there was no going back. It's been 3 months since then, and I haven't said a word to my parents about what I found. But every time I see them, I notice the little ways they try to keep control. My mom offering to go through old stuff together, or my dad suddenly reminiscing about the good old days. They're trying to distract me, or warn me. Maybe both. I haven't decided what to do yet. Some days I think about going to the police. Other days I wonder if that would even help. The system's old, my dad's ties go deep. And I'm just one person holding the wrong truth in a house full of fake memories, but I can't forget what I know, and I won't let it go. Last week, I drove past the Lake Lodge. I hadn't been back there since I was maybe 10. It looked smaller now, run down. The sign had fallen halfway off, and the windows were boarded. But the gate was unlocked. I parked down the road and walked the rest of the way in the rain, like I was being pulled there. Not out of nostalgia, but necessity. The inside was gutted. Empty beer bottles, water damage, graffiti. But as I walked toward the back room, the one with the heavy door I remember from childhood, I found something I hadn't expected. A small brass key duct taped under the old fuse box. The tape was faded like it had been there for years. I don't know why I peeled it off. Maybe I was hoping it'd lead to nothing, but the moment I held it in my palm, I knew it was something. The back room hadn't changed much. Still had that strange stale smell. The key worked on a smaller metal cabinet I never remembered noticing before, built into the wall behind a rotted shelf. Inside were old Polaroids, time-stamped receipts, and a list of names. Just first names. Some I recognized. Some I didn't, but one made my heart drop. It was mine. That's when I knew they hadn't just covered for him. They were keeping tabs on everyone. I left everything where I found it and walked straight to my car. I didn't take photos. I didn't grab anything. It was instinct, like touching it too long would tie me to it somehow. But I drove straight to Diane's and told her what I saw. She didn't ask why I hadn't brought it. She just said, "Good, you're learning." Later that night, she handed me an envelope. Inside was a photo of me at the lodge. I must have been 6. Cake on my face, sitting next to someone I don't remember. But in the background, clear as day, was my uncle. And beside him, another man I'd never seen before. Diane pointed to him. "That's the one they never talk about," she said. "He's the thread." I asked who he was. All I know is he handled things. Whenever something needed to disappear, that night, I looked through old photo albums, scanned every birthday party, barbecue, fishing trip. And sure enough, he was always there, never front and center. Never in the family shots, always blurry, always behind someone, and never once named. I started calling him the shadow in my notes. A week later, I got a voicemail from an unknown number. A man's voice, calm, even pleasant. He said, "You're asking questions that were already answered a long time ago. Don't go back to the lodge." Then he hung up. I didn't tell Diane about that one, not yet. Instead, I spent the next 3 nights scanning every public record I could find, land ownership, business filings, anything tied to the Lake Lodge. My dad's name wasn't on anything. Not directly. But one shell company led to another, and eventually I found a single link, a P.O. box rented out in my mom's maiden name. It was subtle, sloppy, like they'd never expected anyone to look that deep. I sent a letter to the box, just a simple sentence. I know about the list. 3 days later, I came home to find my room completely rearranged, not ransacked, nothing stolen or broken, just touched. My drawers were in the wrong order, my shirts refolded in a way I never fold them. A mug in the dishwasher I hadn't used. It was a message. I moved out the next day. Didn't tell them where I was going. I cut contact completely, blocked their numbers. I didn't feel brave. I felt hunted. I've been staying with Diane ever since. It's quiet, but I can't sleep, not really. I keep hearing things, doors creaking, phones clicking. I know it sounds paranoid, but you don't grow up in a family like mine and come out thinking everything's just a coincidence. Last night, Diane handed me something I didn't expect. A notebook. Mine, but not the one I kept recently. It was a journal I'd had in middle school, full of nonsense, drawings, notes, weird questions. But tucked inside the back cover was a folded piece of yellow paper. It had one sentence, written in my handwriting. "Don't forget what they said when they thought you weren't listening." I don't remember writing it, but I know what it means. There's more. So much more. Old arguments I'm starting to hear differently in my head. Stories I thought were harmless that don't feel so innocent now. My parents built a version of reality and fed it to us piece by piece, curated, edited, redacted. And for a long time I swallowed it whole, smiled through it, repeated it. But now that I've seen the edges, the seams where the truth leaks out, I can't stop noticing it. And if there's one thing I've learned in all this, it's that silence doesn't protect you. It just makes you easier to erase. 2 days ago, I found a photo album in Diane's attic I'd never seen before. It was labeled 87 feet 94, handwritten in blue ink, and the pages were thick with years of dust. Most of the photos looked ordinary. Family reunions, summer cookouts, birthdays, but on the 3rd page there was a shot that stopped me cold. It was our living room, Christmas Eve, 1991. I was maybe 3, sitting on the carpet in footy pajamas, holding a toy train. Behind me stood my parents, and just to their left, partially cropped out but unmistakable, was the shadow. Same neutral expression, same posture, same ghost-like presence. It was the first time I'd ever seen him inside our house. I showed it to Diane. She stared for a long time before saying anything. "That photo wasn't in the original album," she said. I would have remembered, so either someone added it later, or someone meant for me to find it now. That night, I started thinking about everything I'd forgotten. Every late-night knock on the door growing up. Every time the power went out and my parents got weirdly tense. Every time I woke up and swore I'd heard voices downstairs, only to find the house empty. It all felt so small back then. But now those moments have shape, weight, and the more I look back, the more I see how carefully they kept me blind. I decided to visit someone I hadn't seen in over a decade. My cousin Rachel. Her mom was my dad's sister, but they hadn't spoken since around 2003. I never knew why. The last I'd heard, she was living 2 towns over, working at a dental clinic. She remembered me right away, hugged me like no time had passed. We sat in her tiny apartment surrounded by plants and the soft hum of a window fan. I didn't even have to bring it up. She just said, "You've been talking to Diane, haven't you?" I nodded. She exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for years. Rachel told me she'd once found something in her mom's closet, a folder with her name on it. It was full of medical records, not hers, not anyone she recognized, but every record listed her home address. Every visit had been scheduled, then abruptly canceled. When she asked her mom, she got slapped. That was the last time she asked about anything. She moved out at 17, cut ties, tried to forget. She said something that's been playing on loop in my head since. They were building something back then. I don't know what, but it was bigger than any one person. And we were all just parts, replaceable. Before I left, she handed me a small cardboard box. "I've been keeping this," she said. Didn't know why. Maybe for this. Inside were cassette tapes. Dozens, labeled with initials and dates. I haven't listened to them yet. I don't even own a tape player. but I held each one like it was radioactive, like something sacred and dangerous all at once. That night, I went home to Diane's and locked my door. I couldn't sleep. At 2:13 a.m., someone knocked. 3 times. Quiet, deliberate, I didn't open it. Didn't move, just waited, holding my breath. Minutes passed, then silence. When I finally opened the door an hour later, the hallway was empty, but on the floor sat a single item. My childhood bracelet. The one my mom said I lost at the beach when I was 7. I never saw it again. Until now, it was spotless, untarnished, like someone had been keeping it safe all this time. I didn't tell Diane about the bracelet right away. I just stood there for what felt like an hour, turning it over in my palm. The little silver charm with my initials engraved on it hadn't aged a day. Not a scratch, not a scuff, like it had been placed in a drawer the moment it vanished and kept there ever since. I had to sit down. My head felt light, like I was about to float away. What was the message here? That they were watching, that they'd always been watching. The next morning, Diane noticed something was off. She's not the type to pry, but she didn't need to ask. She just said, "It's getting closer, isn't it?" I nodded. That's all I could do, because the truth was, I didn't even know what it was yet. She told me something she hadn't before. Back in 2002, right after my cousin Rachel left home, Diane had started getting mail that wasn't meant for her. Not bills, not junk. Just envelopes, no return address, no note inside, just contents. Once it was a single black and white photo of a road sign in another state. Another time, a post-it note with an address she didn't recognize. And once, just once, a newspaper clipping about a man who had died in a fire 3 towns over. A man Diane swore she'd never met. But on the back of the clipping was a shopping list written in my mother's handwriting. Diane had kept them all in a box. She brought it out that night, laid each envelope on the table like evidence. Together they meant nothing, but when you looked at them all at once, you could feel something, like a net slowly closing. I think it's a language, Diane said, but not one you or I were ever meant to understand. That night I called Rachel, asked her about the tapes. She paused. "I've never listened to them," she said. "I was too scared I'd recognize a voice." I drove over and picked them up the next morning. 36 cassettes, most were unlabeled. The rest had handwritten dates, some going back to the 80s. One said simply Easter. Another, car ride, 1993. Diane had an old tape deck in her garage. We chose one at random and pressed play, static, then voices, children in the background, laughter, music. It sounded like a family gathering, but as the tape rolled on, the tone shifted, the laughter faded. The music stopped, then a voice, unmistakably my father's, said, "Turn it off now." I said, "Turn it off." Silence, then another voice, "You know what happens if she remembers." We stopped the tape. Neither of us said anything for a long time. That's when we decided we needed help. Not police, not yet. Not lawyers. Just someone outside the web. Someone who hadn't grown up under the same roof or heard the same sanitized stories. I thought of my old friend Lyle. We'd gone to high school together. Lost touch after he joined the military, then reconnected briefly when I moved back. He was working as a private investigator now, mostly doing divorce work. But if anyone could look into a name, a location, a timeline, it was him. I sent him a message, told him I needed to meet, didn't explain why, just said, "It's about my parents, and something that might not be legal." He replied within 10 minutes, "Coffee shop." Tomorrow, 11. I barely slept that night. My thoughts felt like static. Every memory I had of my childhood was now suspect. Every camping trip, every holiday, every time I got sick and my mom sat by my bed all night. Were those moments real or rehearsed? What had I missed while I was being told I was safe? The next morning, I showed Lyle everything I had, the notes, the photos, the copy of the tape. He didn't say much, just listened, took a few notes. Then he looked up and said, "You want me to look into this shadow guy, right?" I nodded. "Give me 48 hours. He called back in 24. "I found him," he said. I felt my blood run cold. "His name's not what they told you," Lyle continued. "It's Charles Hagan. He changed it in 1985. Before that, he went by Chuck Harmon. He was never formally charged with anything, but he was named in a sealed report from a children's group home that was shut down in 1982. He disappeared for 2 years, then reemerged under the new name, in your dad's company." My mouth went dry. Lyle wasn't done. He was listed on incorporation documents. Briefly. Then taken off a year later. But he never really left. He just stopped appearing on paper. Everything after that was backdoor cash, untraceable. And now, I asked, now he's still around. I tracked a P.O. box registered under a fake charity. The name on the lease is the same one on that envelope you said showed up with your bracelet. So he'd sent it. He knew I was looking, and now he wanted me to know that he knew. I told Diane everything. She didn't look shocked, just resolved, like a clock that had finally struck the hour it was built for. "This is what they do," she said. "They make you feel like you're too small to matter. Like you're crazy, like remembering is dangerous." I asked her if she regretted digging. "No," she said, "because the truth doesn't go away. It just gets quieter." We agreed to keep everything locked away in multiple places. Copies of the tapes, digital scans of the letters, multiple flash drives hidden across town. If anything happened to us, an accident, a break-in, anything suspicious, Lyle had instructions. The files would go public. We weren't trying to expose some grand conspiracy. This wasn't a movie. But we wanted the record to exist. We wanted the silence to end. And yet, the more we did, the more the world around us changed. A neighbor I'd grown up with, Mrs. Klein, stopped me in the grocery store, put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Some stories don't need retelling, sweetheart. Some things are best left where they were buried." I didn't respond, because the thing is, I didn't even know she knew. That night, I walked the neighborhood like I used to when I was a teenager. Hoodie up, headphones in, just wandering, pretending that motion meant safety. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. The porch lights felt like spotlights. The dark windows like eyes. Every familiar crack in the sidewalk had a weight to it, as if the ground itself remembered more than I did. I ended up outside my parents' house. I didn't mean to. My feet just carried me there. Their living room light was on, and for a second I could see my dad standing by the bookshelf, sipping something dark from a mug. My mom was sitting on the couch, not talking, just still. The kind of still that looks like waiting. I didn't go in, I just stood across the street, frozen, until the curtain shifted and I realized they'd seen me. I turned and walked away. The next day, I got an envelope at Diane's, hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed, clean. No smudges, no name at the bottom. It said, "We raised you better than this. Come home. Let's talk. No more games, no threat, no apology." Just those words, like a reminder of who they still thought they were. I burned the letter in Diane's sink. The following week, Lyle dug up something we hadn't expected. A property deed tied to an LLC registered in another state, one no one in our family had ever mentioned. It was a farm, remote, off a state highway surrounded by forest. According to public records, it hadn't been occupied in over 20 years, but utility records told a different story. The power had been used intermittently, always under a different name. We drove out there. Diane came too. She insisted the driveway was overgrown. We had to park on the road and hike the rest of the way. The house was still standing, barely, sagging porch, broken windows, rust on the lock. But the door wasn't chained, just shut. Inside, it smelled like mildew and wood smoke, like someone had been there recently. We searched the house room by room, dust on everything, except a single desk in the upstairs bedroom. That desk had been wiped down, and the drawer was a map, hand-drawn, of our neighborhood. Circles marked certain houses, mine, Diane's, Rachel's old place. And written in the corner, "Silence holds, we didn't take the map, we photographed it." Every inch, Lyle stayed behind to take more photos. Diane and I left first. As we walked back through the woods, she said something that's been replaying in my mind ever since. They never meant for us to find each other. That's why they scattered us, why they kept us quiet, alone, confused. We were never supposed to compare notes. That's when it really hit me. None of this was about one incident, not just a cover-up. It was a system, something they'd built over years, maybe generations. A framework of obedience and favor trading and silence passed down like old recipes. I couldn't help but think about my childhood again. The times I'd woken up to whispered phone calls in the kitchen. The way my mom always knew when I'd overheard something, even if I didn't understand it. The time I came home from school and all the family photos had been taken down for cleaning. They never went back up. They were curating my memory, trying to make sure I only saw what they wanted me to see. And now I was starting to see the seams. A few nights later, Rachel called me in tears. Someone had broken into her apartment. Nothing was stolen, not officially, but the tapes, gone. All of them. The box was left wide open, no fingerprints, no sign of forced entry. She said she'd been staying with a friend that night, hadn't told anyone she'd be gone except me. I apologized 100 times. But all she said was, "It's not your fault." They were always going to come for it. I just hoped they'd do it later. That same night, someone left a voice message on Diane's landline. It was 3 words, "Close it down," no number, no trace. We met up the next day, me, Diane, Rachel, and Lyle, in a park across town, sitting on a bench like nothing was wrong. We went over everything again, comparing what we remembered, what we still had, what was gone. Diane said something I still haven't forgotten. It's not about blowing it up. It's about making it undeniable. One record, one truth. Somewhere they can't scrub, we started building a file. Not digital, handwritten, printed, physical, something that could live in a dozen locations at once. We made copies of the most important evidence. Transcripts of tapes, scans of letters, family photos annotated with what we now knew. And then we made plans, not revenge, just protection, because by now we knew whatever this web was, it was wide. It had reach, and the moment they sensed we were organizing, the rules would change. We weren't just remembering anymore. We were documenting. The next step wasn't flashy. It wasn't some dramatic reveal or confrontation. It was paperwork. We made 3 binders. One went to a lawyer Diane trusted, not family, not local. A woman she'd once helped during a rough divorce. The second went into a bank vault under Lyle's name. The third stayed with me, hidden in a location I'll never share out loud, not even here. We labeled them the same, record in case of silence. Each binder held timelines, voice transcript summaries, name lists, copies of old documents, and a full written account of everything we'd gathered. Our goal wasn't to take anyone down, not directly. We just wanted a record that couldn't be erased, something permanent in a family obsessed with wiping the slate clean every generation. After that, everything got quiet. For 2 weeks, no letters, no calls, no strange visitors. It was almost enough to make me believe we were safe. Then, at 3:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating, not ringing, just a silent call. No ID, just buzzing over and over until I picked up. I didn't speak. A voice said, "You're making copies now." Click. I didn't sleep after that. Just sat on the edge of the bed staring at the blank screen, heart in my throat. I didn't tell Diane. I didn't tell Rachel. I didn't even tell Lyle, not because I was scared of worrying them, because something in me wanted to know who else knew, and how fast the web reacted to even the smallest ripple. The next day, I drove to the property near the lake. Not the lodge, a small side road that dead-ended into a clearing we used to hike through as kids. On the edge of the tree line, I found it. A single wooden post, new, fresh wood, hammered into the dirt with no purpose, no rope, no sign, no marker. Just a post, but carved into it, barely visible unless the light hit just right, were 4 words. "This stays in blood." I didn't take a photo. I didn't touch it. I just backed away. By then I understood. This wasn't just about power or money or silence. This was legacy. They weren't hiding a mistake. They were maintaining a system. Something handed down, not spoken about, embedded in dinner tables and photo albums and how things are done. It had nothing to do with guilt. It was about control. Later that week, Lyle came to me with a new development. One of the names on our list, someone we'd flagged but never confirmed, had been reported missing. A man in his late 50s, used to work for the county clerk's office, lived alone, no kids, no spouse. According to public records, he'd signed the original property transfer documents for the Lake Lodge under a witness clause. Now he was gone. No foul play, no signs of struggle, just vanished. Lyle showed me the police report. It was 1 paragraph long. Subject failed to report to work. Last seen by neighbor retrieving mail. No further leads at this time, that was it. No follow-up, no press, nothing. I called Diane and Rachel immediately. We met that evening in the back of a library. No cell phones, just pens, paper, and a shared sense that the walls were closing in. Diane looked more tired than I'd ever seen her. "They're cleaning the edges," she said. "That's what they always do when something starts to leak. They don't fix the leak, they erase the water." We made a decision. We started working on something we called the letter. It wasn't a confession. It wasn't a threat. It was a detailed, factual statement of what we knew, what we suspected, and what we feared. It named no one directly, but it painted a very clear picture. We each signed our own version, notarized separately, and sealed them. They were sent to 5 people, trusted people, some we hadn't spoken to in years. Some didn't even know the full story. But they knew enough to open the letter if anything happened to us. We hoped it would never be necessary, but in families like mine, hope isn't a plan. That weekend, I went back to my parents' house, unannounced, uninvited. Just walked up to the front door and knocked. My mother opened it. She looked at me like she was expecting me, not surprised, not confused. "Just prepared. Come in," she said. I didn't move. I said, "I found the tapes." A pause, then quietly she said, "That wasn't meant for you." "None of it was," I said. "But it found me anyway." She nodded once. Like that was fair. Then she stepped outside, closed the door behind her, and stood on the porch with me like we were neighbors. "I loved you," she said. "Everything we did to protect what we built." I asked her what that meant, what they built. Her response, stability, reputation, survival. She didn't ask what I was going to do next, because she already knew I hadn't decided. She just said, "We don't erase our mistakes, we build around them." You're the first one who looked underneath. Then she went back inside and closed the door. I haven't seen her since, and still, that's not the end. In the months that followed, life didn't go back to normal, it just reshaped around the truth. Rachel moved to a different state. Didn't tell us where, just left one final voicemail that said, "If you need me, you'll know how to find me." But I need distance from all of it, from them, from what they made us. Lyle kept digging, quietly. He told me once over coffee that he'd started noticing overlaps. Other families, similar stories, not connected by blood, but by proximity, neighborhoods, churches, Rotary clubs. A loose web of people who all seemed to operate by the same code. Silence equals safety. He said it wasn't just our family, it was an ecosystem. Diane, she stayed, still bakes, still watches the driveway when a car she doesn't recognize slows down. She's not waiting for anything anymore, she just refuses to be caught unaware again. And I don't blame her. As for me, I moved but not far, close enough to drive past the old house if I wanted to. I don't, but I could. Sometimes I sit in a cafe 3 blocks away and just watch the neighborhood move. Kids riding bikes, dogs barking behind fences, people waving from porches like nothing under their feet ever rotted. Most days, no one would know a thing, but I carry it. I carry every photograph, every scrap of paper, every word that wasn't supposed to be overheard. I carry the silence, not because I want to protect them, but because I've learned how dangerous it is to forget. There's no resolution, no courtroom climax, no justice that fits the scale of what they built, just the quiet knowing that I wasn't supposed to know, and now I do. Sometimes I still get mail with no return address. A photocopied newspaper clipping, a scribbled name on hotel stationery. Once, a burned edge of a photo I'd never seen before, just enough to make out my mom's handwriting on the back. I don't throw them away, I add them to the record. Because this isn't about revenge, it never was. It's about memory. About making sure someone remembers that behind every perfectly set dinner table, every family photo with forced smiles, every story about how things were, there might be something else, something older, heavier, harder to name, and I'll be damned if they get to bury it again. So if you're reading this and wondering whether to ask that one question that's been chewing at you for years, about why your aunt stopped coming around, why your cousin vanished, why your parents flinch when you bring up a certain name, ask it, because sometimes what starts as something small ends with you knowing way too much, and once you do, you can never go back.